Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I am doing my picks for the Asian Readathon, and if you stick around to the very end, I actually am reviewing two books that I've already read so far as part of the Asian Readathon. So if you're not familiar with the Asian Readathon, it is to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the United States in the month of May. With Cindy, she used to be called Reads with Cindy, created this tag I believe a couple of years ago, and it was one that when I saw her announcement video for this year, I knew I really wanted to participate in, and it's part of the reason why I worked really hard to try and get my channel up and running, knowing that I wanted to participate in this. I've linked her video in my description. I encourage you, if you want to participate in Asian Readathon, to please go out and watch her video. She goes into a lot of detail. She has a Google sheet. She has a story graph. She has a lot of charities that you can go and support for Asian American and Pacific Islander History Month. But what the actual Readathon is about is she has 5 prompts that she has created to get people to read more Asian authors. And so one of the things is if you pick a Japanese author for the first prompt, and then if you read another Japanese author, it doesn't count for any subsequent prompts. One of the things is trying to get people to really read maybe more than just the bigger Asian countries like China or Japan, and branch out into some others. And so in her Google sheet, she has all of them listed, which was super helpful for me when I was going to go pick my books. So you can certainly read as many Asian authors, obviously, or Asian books that you would like as part of this readathon. But in order to fulfill the prompts, you have to have different countries. You can pick a book that covers more than one prompt. That is allowed or whatever. Anyway. So, moving right along, let's jump right into what my picks were for Asian Readathon. So the first question is actually first prompt is actually read any book written by an Asian author. So what I did is I went to my 1001 book list and tried to find books that were in my already massive list to read that might qualify for covering these prompts. So the first one that I selected is actually a Japanese author called, and the book is called Silence by Shusaku Endo, and this is the story of 2 Jesuit priests who travel in the 17th century to Japan to kind of talk about their faith, and it's their story and the persecution that they had while they were trying to do that particular task. It is one that I don't know much about right now, other than what the book description said, but it is a Japanese author, and it is on my 1001 book list. So that's my first book pick for the Asian Readathon. So the second one is read any book featuring an Asian protagonist. And so that book doesn't qualify for that because it's not necessarily an Asian protagonist. So the one I picked is an Indian author called Indra Sinha, and the book is called Animals People. So this is the story, if I read the back, ever since he can remember, Animal has gone on all fours, his back twisted beyond repair by the catastrophic events of that night when a burning fog of poison smoke from the local factory blazed out over the town. So from what I have read in synopsis of this book is it's based on a very traumatic event in India, and so that some people have found it very hard to read. I am interested in it. I'm not loving the main character's name. I'm hoping that doesn't become problematic for me. I haven't read anything else about this book, so we'll see what goes with that one. So that's for prompt number 2. So for prompt number 3, it is to read a book by an Asian author in your favorite genre. So my favorite genre, if you watched my newbie video, is actually murder mystery. And I had to dig because I didn't know of any, and it didn't immediately come up in my 1001 book list as well for an Asian author who writes murder mystery. And so what I found was actually a series called Inspector Singh Investigates by Shamini Flint, who is a Malaysian author, and the book that I picked was Inspector Singh Investigates a Most Peculiar Malaysian Murder. This is the story of Inspector Singh, who is from Singapore, who has to travel to Kuala Lumpur for a resident or a citizen of Singapore who is accused of murdering her ex husband, and it is the story of him basically trying to figure out what actually happened in that. So completely brand new author, completely brand new country that I've never read a book from, so it was very exciting. I actually have already read this one, so this is one of the ones that I'll review at the end of this video if you stick around. So the next one is read any nonfiction book written by an Asian author. So for this one, I picked a book that I had seen a lot and didn't necessarily know that much about, knew the character, or knew the person's picture, which has been very famous, but didn't know much about their story. So for this one, I picked I Am Malala. So this is the thing that this has already done for me, is that I thought this was actually in Afghanistan, and it involved her having acid thrown on her, and instead it's actually in Pakistan, and she was shot for wanting to attend school, or trying to attend school. That's the basis I know about this. She is also, as you can see from the cover, the youngest Nobel Prize winner. So interested to read this one. I have a feeling what it's going to do is make me very self-reflective on the privilege that I personally had in regards to education. I certainly never had to worry about someone shooting me for wanting to go to school. So I am excited to read that one. So the last one is read any book written by an Asian author that is not U.S. centric. So for this one, any of the 4 books I've already selected would actually qualify, because none of them are U.S. centric books. But I wanted to tie back into the reason why I wanted to do this challenge, which is my husband is actually originally from Iran. And so I wanted to bring in a book that really was from Iran and talked about things in that country. And so I went actually just to my bookshelf and found Perspolis, which is by Marjane Satrapi. And as you can see from the tabs, I have already read this one, and is one that I'll review in a few minutes. But this is the story of Marjane when she is in Iran during the Islamic Revolution and during the war with Iraq. And it is basically her story as she's growing up from the ages of 6 to 14. And it is one that I didn't actually realize we owned this, and was so happy to find it. So I will be talking about that in the review in just hopefully a couple of minutes. So those are to fulfill the 5 prompts. I will say that I had another book come available at the library, which is from an Asian author, which is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. I have read 3 other books of Murakami. One I really liked, one I didn't like, and one was right down the middle. So I'm curious to see what I think about Norwegian Wood. And Mark over at Book Time with Elvis does not like this book. So I'm really curious to see why if I like it or not. So his channel is also linked in the description below if you want to check him out. And then as a stretch goal, and it is a severe stretch goal, is the last book that I found on my 1001 book list, which is actually Wild Swans. And so this is the story of 3 different generations in China. I will say that in a couple of things that I've read about this book, that it's super depressing. And if you watched my review video, I read a lot of depressing books in April, so we'll see if I get to it. Right now, I'm going to call it a serious stretch goal. It is chunky, so we'll see if I make it to this one. But so those are the picks that I have so far for the Asian Readathon. And now I'm going to go in and just do the 2 books that I've actually already read and review them really quickly for you. The first one is, like I said, Inspector Singh Investigates the Most Peculiar Malaysian Murder. That's quite the tongue twister as well. So this is the story of Inspector Singh, who travels to Malaysia because there's a Singapore resident who is accused of murdering her ex-husband, and he is sent part from a political stance to try and figure out if this is a problem, if she truly committed this crime. And it is his process of trying to figure out, okay, who actually did it. So I will say that I like the Inspector Singh character right from the beginning. He's described as an overweight, sweaty, hairy, unconvincing example of a policeman, which gave me a little bit of shades of Hercule Poirot, not necessarily all of the descriptors of sweaty and hairy, but the unconvincing example of a policeman. I always thought that way a little bit about Poirot, which made him such an effective detective. And this one definitely has similar aspects to him. And with this, the author did an amazing job of making me like him in one of the first scenes. So he's in an airport waiting for a flight, and the way he solves a dispute among two people in the first class line is something that I wish I could see in real life. And it was so incredibly clever and really made me like him and how he solves problems. So he travels to Kuala Lumpur, meets with Chelsea Liu, who is the one who is accused of murdering her horrible ex-husband, who is not a sympathetic character at all. Horrible to her, horrible to the environment, lots of bad things about this particular person. So the author does a magnificent job of throwing in possible people who could have done it. Was it the ex-wife who had a lot of gripes with him? Was it the son who was upset with his father for stealing a girlfriend that he wanted to have? Is it the brother? Is it the other brother? Is it the business partner? Lots of different possibilities in there, and your focus switches all over the place as far as who you think might have done this murder. You have someone who confesses to the murder and then recants his confession. And it really goes through just a lot of ins and outs and interviews as trying to figure out who did murder this person. And so it does wrap up really nicely at the end. I was satisfied with that, how it ended up. My only piece of it and why I only gave it 4 out of 5 stars was because I wanted more of the Inspector Singh character. I liked him and I wanted to see him work through everything, and the point of view in this book switches around a bit. And I just wanted to be able to see him really go through and dig and figure out what happened. But 4 out of stars if you're looking for a fun, easy read for your Asian readathon. Definitely pick it up. It was interesting for me. I did enjoy it, and I did read it very, very quickly, which was good because I have a lot to read this month. So the last one is Perspolis by Marjane Satrapi. As I showed earlier today, is this book. This is the story of her in Iran from the ages of 6 to 14 as the regime is changing and the rules are changing, and it's also during the war in Iraq. And for this one, what really hit home for me is my husband was actually in Iran during this time, and he has talked a little bit about bombs being dropped and things like that. And this really just brought that home for me, which probably biased my review quite a bit, but it is still very lovely and well written. If you are interested in learning a bit more about Iran in this time, it is a great way to do so because it is actually a comic kind of strip. So it was very, very interesting and fun way to go through, and a quick way to go through this story. The main character really did go through quite a bit in this time and really had some challenges learning how to work in this new regime. And there are stories of horrific events, real events that I have read about since then. And it is just really quite lovely as far as a way to learn about Iran. So highly recommend this book if you want, especially if you want a short one, because it is short and it is a comic. So I love this one. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. And one of the things that I want to share with you is one of the quotes that are in the book, which one of them is, "No scream in the world could have relieved my suffering and my anger," which I found really moving. Just really describes a lot of the pain and trauma that she went through during this time. And then the last one is, "In life, you'll meet a lot of jerks. If they hurt you, tell yourself that it's because they're stupid. That will help keep you from reacting to their cruelty, because there is nothing worse than bitterness and vengeance. Always keep your dignity and be true to yourself." And I just like that message. I like that message as the closing for today. Again, 5 out of 5 stars for this one. If you want to learn a little bit more about Iran during the Islamic Revolution, it's an easy way to do so. And it's a fun and interesting read. So anyway, I hope you like this video, and until next time, thanks everyone.